Story 8. God saves Joseph and his family. Many years later, when Jacob was an old man, he sent his favorite son Joseph to check on his brothers who were taking care of the herds. Joseph's brothers hated him because their father loved him most, and because Joseph had dreamed that he would be their ruler. When Joseph came to his brothers, they kidnapped him and sold him to some slave traders. Before Joseph's brothers returned home, they tore Joseph's robe and dipped it in goat's blood. Then they showed the robe to their father so he would think that a wild animal had killed Joseph. Jacob was very sad. The slave traders took Joseph to Egypt. Egypt was a large, powerful country located along the Nile River. The slave traders sold Joseph as a slave to a wealthy government official. Joseph served his master well, and God blessed Joseph. His master's wife tried to sleep with Joseph, but Joseph refused to sin against God in this way. She became angry and falsely accused Joseph so that he was arrested and sent to prison. Even in prison, Joseph remained faithful to God, and God blessed him. After 2 years, Joseph was still in prison, even though he was innocent. One night, the Pharaoh, which is what the Egyptians called their kings, had 2 dreams that disturbed him greatly. None of his advisors could tell him the meaning of the dreams. God had given Joseph the ability to interpret dreams, so Pharaoh had Joseph brought to him from the prison. Joseph interpreted the dreams for him and said, "God is going to send 7 years of plentiful harvests, followed by 7 years of famine." Pharaoh was so impressed with Joseph that he appointed him to be the second most powerful man in all of Egypt. Joseph told the people to store up large amounts of food during the 7 years of good harvests. Then Joseph sold the food to the people when the 7 years of famine came, so they would have enough to eat. The famine was severe not only in Egypt, but also in Canaan, where Jacob and his family lived. So Jacob sent his older sons to Egypt to buy food. The brothers did not recognize Joseph when they stood before him to buy food, but Joseph recognized them. After testing his brothers to see if they had changed, Joseph said to them, "I am your brother Joseph. Do not be afraid. You tried to do evil when you sold me as a slave, but God used the evil for good. Come and live in Egypt so I can provide for you and your families." When Joseph's brothers returned home and told their father, Jacob, that Joseph was still alive, he was very happy. Even though Jacob was an old man, he moved to Egypt with all of his family, and they all lived there. Before Jacob died, he blessed each of his sons. The covenant promises that God gave to Abraham were passed on to Isaac, then to Jacob, and then to Jacob's 12 sons and their families. The descendants of the 12 sons became the 12 tribes of Israel. Story 9. God calls Moses. After Joseph died, all of his relatives stayed in Egypt. They and their descendants continued to live there for many years and had many children. They were called the Israelites. After hundreds of years, the number of Israelites had become very large. The Egyptians were no longer grateful that Joseph had done so much to help them. They became afraid of the Israelites because there were so many of them. So the Pharaoh who was ruling Egypt at that time made the Israelites slaves to the Egyptians. The Egyptians forced the Israelites to build many buildings and even whole cities. The hard work made their lives miserable, but God blessed them, and they had even more children. Pharaoh saw that the Israelites were having many babies, so he ordered his people to kill all Israelite baby boys by throwing them into the Nile River. A certain Israelite woman gave birth to a baby boy. She and her husband hid the baby for as long as they could. When the boy's parents could no longer hide him, they put him in a floating basket among the reeds along the edge of the Nile River in order to save him from being killed. His older sister watched to see what would happen to him. A daughter of Pharaoh saw the basket and looked inside. When she saw the baby, she took him as her own son. She hired an Israelite woman to nurse him without realizing the woman was the baby's own mother. When the child was old enough that he no longer needed his mother's milk, she returned him to Pharaoh's daughter, who named him Moses. One day, when Moses had grown up, he saw an Egyptian beating an Israelite slave. Moses tried to help his fellow Israelite. When Moses thought nobody would see, he killed the Egyptian and buried his body. But someone saw what Moses had done. Pharaoh learned what Moses had done. He tried to kill him, but Moses fled from Egypt into the wilderness. Pharaoh's soldiers could not find him there. Moses became a shepherd in the wilderness far away from Egypt. He married a woman from that place and had 2 sons. Moses was taking care of his father-in-law's herd of sheep. One day, he saw a bush on fire, burning without being destroyed. He went close to the bush to look at it. When he was very close, God spoke to him. He said, "Moses, take off your shoes. You are standing on holy ground." God said, "I have seen the suffering of my people. I will send you to Pharaoh so that you can bring the Israelites out of their slavery in Egypt. I will give them the land of Canaan, the land I promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Moses asked, "What if the people want to know who sent me? What should I say?" God said, "I am who I am. Tell them, I am has sent me to you. Also tell them, I am Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is my name forever." Moses was afraid and did not want to go to Pharaoh because he thought he could not speak well. So God sent Moses' brother Aaron to help him. Story 10. The 10 Plagues. God warned Moses and Aaron that Pharaoh would be stubborn. When they went to Pharaoh, they said, "This is what the God of Israel says, 'Let my people go.'" But Pharaoh did not listen to them. Instead of letting the Israelites go free, he forced them to work even harder. Pharaoh kept refusing to let the people go, so God sent 10 terrible plagues on Egypt. Through these plagues, God showed Pharaoh that he is more powerful than Pharaoh and all of Egypt's gods. God turned the Nile River into blood, but Pharaoh still would not let the Israelites go. God sent frogs all over Egypt. Pharaoh begged Moses to take away the frogs, but after all the frogs died, Pharaoh hardened his heart and would not let the Israelites leave Egypt. So God sent a plague of gnats. Then he sent a plague of flies. Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and told them that if they stopped the plague, the Israelites could leave Egypt. When Moses prayed, God removed all the flies from Egypt. But Pharaoh hardened his heart and would not let the people go free. Next, God caused all the farm animals that belonged to the Egyptians to get sick and die. But Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not let the Israelites go. Then God told Moses to throw ashes into the air in front of Pharaoh. When he did, painful skin sores appeared on the Egyptians, but not on the Israelites. God hardened Pharaoh's heart, and Pharaoh would not let the Israelites go free. After that, God sent hail that destroyed most of the crops in Egypt and killed anybody who went outside. Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and told them, "I have sinned. You may go." So Moses prayed, and the hail stopped falling from the sky. But Pharaoh sinned again and hardened his heart. He would not let the Israelites go free. So God caused swarms of locusts to come over Egypt. These locusts ate all the crops that the hail had not destroyed. Then God sent darkness that lasted for 3 days. It was so dark that the Egyptians could not leave their houses. But there was light where the Israelites lived. Even after these 9 plagues, Pharaoh still refused to let the Israelites go free. Since Pharaoh would not listen, God planned to send one last plague. This would change Pharaoh's mind.